It is Ashton Gillotte's time to shine for the Louisville Cardinals. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're going to talk about the three key defensive players to watch for in the season opener against Georgia Tech. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. As always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. As we talked about the three key offensive players in the season opener for the Louisville Cardinals on Tuesday, we're now focusing on the defensive side of the ball, where we will begin by talking about why this is Ashton Gillotte's time to shine. We'll then talk about why you need to keep an eye on Stanquan Clark in the season opener. And then to conclude the show, we'll explain how Josh Minkins is due for a breakout season in the Cardinals secondary. So season opener, week 1, Friday evening, 7:30 kickoff in the Aflac kickoff game against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets down in Atlanta in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This Louisville defense is on paper as good as the Cardinals have had in quite some time. Now, they lost a lot of big pieces on this defense. Yasir Abdullah, Yaya Diaby, more specifically to the NFL, and then Monty Montgomery and Dorian Jones to transfer. And you also had Cottrell Clark and Momo Sanogo go to the NFL as well. So didn't want to leave those guys out. But still saying that there is a lot of talent on the side of the ball. At least on paper, it looks like this team is going to be as good, if not better, than the Louisville defense last year. One thing to focus on, there is a scheme change, 4-2-5 base defensive package, no more 3-4, so you're going to see more versatility in the back half of the defense, a lot more disguised blitzes. It's going to be very interesting to see how this defense looks on the field in game 1. But regardless of that change, the one continuity on the defensive line, one of the continuities, the main continuity, is star edge rusher Ashton Gillotte. It's his time to shine. There is no Yaya. There is no Yasir. So he has to be the guy. Granted, last year, he was able to see career highs in total tackles, assisted tackles, pass deflections, sacks, forced fumbles, etc. He had 23 tackles, 1 pass deflection, 7 sacks, 1 forced fumble. He had 4 sacks in 2021. And he's been a guy that since he has stepped foot on campus, he was supposed to be a project type player. I remember when he committed thinking, okay, by year 3, he could be really, really good because of his explosiveness. He's just got to get his body to the right place. I think he was under 220 when he committed to Louisville. And he added around 40 pounds, I believe, if not more, ahead of his freshman season. He was an early enrollee and absolutely committed to the weight room, into the strength and conditioning program, transformed his body, and the speed stayed with the weight gain. So the explosiveness coupled now with his solid physical frame, and he was able to play a solid secondary, tertiary pass rusher for Louisville outside of Yaya Diaby, and then obviously Yasir Abdullah as an outside linebacker. And then 2022, same unit for the team in terms of pass rushers, and he gets better. He records 7 sacks. He forces a fumble. He deflects a pass. Now is a special opportunity. You can look at this one of two ways, and I think that both of these are correct. Number one, there is more opportunity. The sacks that Yasir and Yaya recorded could now, some of them potentially go to Ashton. There's certain plays where Ashton got into the backfield as well, but Diaby and Abdullah got there first. Or guys on the interior got there first. Monty Montgomery got there first. Momo Sanogo got there first. Granted, you replace those players with Stephen Herron from Stanford, Louisville native. You have Popeye Williams, who's going to make an impact this year. You have a veteran like Cam Wilson. You can also look at Vic Brown as an underclassman. I expect to make some sort of an impact. Mason Rieger is back. So you have a lot of talented guys still on this team. Granted, replacing Yaya and Yasir is by committee. You're not going to be able to do that one player for one player. But I do expect Ash, again, improve those numbers, a potential double-digit sack candidate. But I said we're going to look at this two ways. To play the devil's advocate, there's more opportunity with Yasir and Yaya gone, but now the offensive shift in terms of attention, the opposing offenses are now going to scheme against you more than they did last year because they don't have to scheme for Yasir, scheme for Yaya, who were probably 1A and 1B in the Louisville pass rush, and Ashton is sitting at number 2. Now Ashton is the clear number 1, and you will start to see more scheming towards trying to disrupt Gillotte. That's going to be something that I think he's going to have to work through is, not only fighting through offensive schemes, but fighting through schemes to where you're being viewed as the guy. And I think that that's something that I'm interested to see how Gillotte handles early on. Now, granted, it's going to be key for other guys outside of Gillotte to step up and contribute to the pass rush. And I think that will take some of the overall pressure and attention off of Ashton. But there's that two schools of thought. The school that he's going to get more opportunity with the two guys leaving, and now he's the number 1 threat to the opposing offense in terms of pass rush. So you have to really, really zone in and force him to be uncomfortable. Granted, I think that you're going to see Ashton continue to get better. We've said this multiple times on the show. You cannot discredit what another full offseason in the collegiate ranks can do for a player. From you saw when Gillotte stepped foot on campus before freshman year, how much better he got. Significant jump from year 1 to year 2. Now I expect that same type of jump from year 2 to year 3. He's going to go up against an offensive line in this game to where they returned 4 of the 5 starters. Wasn't the greatest offensive line. Jackson Caudell, publisher for Sports Illustrated's Georgia Tech's All Yellow Jackets page, said, this is a older group in the sense that, they were really young last year. They brought 4 of the 5 guys back. They weren't the greatest last year, but it's nice to have continuity going into this season. So I think that the verdict is still out on how good this Georgia Tech offensive line unit is going to be. I think that they're going to be much improved. I don't think they're going to be top 5 in the ACC, but I still do think that they are going to be at least respectable, which is going to be something that, we'll see how big of a challenge it is for this Louisville defensive line. Hence why a couple episodes ago, I said that Louisville needs to really set the tone at the line of scrimmage, not only for their offensive line, but on the defensive side to be able to get after the opposing quarterback. And Georgia Tech has a new quarterback, Haynes King, the transfer from Texas A&M, the new QB1 in the 404. Didn't have the greatest year last year for the Aggies, ended up transferring to Brent Key's team to where, you now have, a offense that I think is going to be pretty solidly balanced, running the football, but also throwing the ball with their new offensive coordinator, having that offensive, passing pedigree, but also having a pretty solid part in the Georgia Bulldogs rushing attack the past 3 years. So main key player to focus on defensively for me is Ashton Gillotte. It's his time to shine. This is his year. It's a money year. I think, honestly, if everything goes right, this will be his last year in a Louisville uniform because he will be a pretty solid NFL draft pick. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go before that decision will even need to be made, but I think that that's just how good he can be this year. He was solid his freshman year. He had a breakout sophomore year, and I think year 3 is to where he can really reach stardom. One of the most underrated defenders in the ACC as it relates to not only as a pass rusher, but overall defense. So I think that this game offers him a solid opportunity. I know it's a offensive line that is seeing some continuity, but still, I think that game one, you're looking for him to make an impact, and he has to, in my opinion, for this little defense to really, really, place their effect onto this game. So continuity for Ashton Gillotte getting better and better. We know we're going to see that explosiveness. We know what we're going to see in terms of getting off of the edge and getting after the quarterback. But what are we going to expect to see from true freshman linebacker Stanquan Clark? Well, I think he's going to see the field in some capacity, and we'll talk about how we could see him for the Cardinals on Friday evening here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Look, getting tickets is something that I dread sometimes, especially when I try to find them last minute, hunting down the best price, competing with other buyers for a popular event, so on and so forth. Look, it shouldn't be that stressful. That's why Gametime is an opportunity that you need to take advantage of. It's fast and easy to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you will have. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can even get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So heading into the second segment of the show, we just talked about the first key defensive player to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in the season opener against Georgia Tech on Friday evening. Now we're going to talk about the second player. We sort of know somewhat what we're going to expect with Ashton Gillotte. He's going to be potentially the best defender on this team. What we don't know is what to expect from true freshman linebacker Stanquan Clark. Clark came to Louisville out of Southern Florida in Miami. He is a guy that was ranked as a borderline 3-star, 4-star level guy, 377th in the country according to 24/7 Sports Composite, 31st best linebacker, 6'2", 215 pounds listed on his recruiting profile, but it's my understanding that he has added some to his frame. And he is a guy that, talking to a handful of recruiting analysts in the South Florida area, have told me, look, I'm not sure why in-state programs let him leave the state. You know, he is a guy that is fairly new to the linebacker position, can play on the outside, but has been transitioning to the inside level position. And I think that he's going to be a player that's going to be very, very good for multiple years at Louisville. But it begs the question, what were the expectations coming into the year? What should they be? And I've been very adamant in saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit, because inside linebacker is a very, very tough position to understand. And especially at the collegiate level, you see extremely highly rated players at the position struggle to play early on in college because it takes a while for them to learn the playbook. It takes a while to learn, just the overall speed of Power 5 Division I football and more. So I wanted to just give it a little bit of time and not necessarily make the expectations so sky high for Stanquan Clark, because not necessarily an indication that I don't think he's good enough, but it was more like, hey, let's just give him time to let him learn. I understand that this is a linebacker room that is up in the air, but let's give him some time to learn. let's give him a couple games to find his footing and, potentially he increases his role, game after game. Now, granted, he has been a player that the coaching staff has raved about all off season long. There was one person around the program that I spoke to last week, and he essentially said, Dalton, like I told you with Chris Bell on the offensive side of the ball, Stanquan Clark is a guy that I'm not sure how the coaching staff keeps him off the field on defense. He potentially has the highest ceiling of any of the linebackers in the group. No disrespect to any of those guys. It's more of a testament to how good Stanquan Clark can be, with that athleticism, that exceptional burst, that speed, explosiveness off the edge. I'm interested to see how he continues to grow as an inside linebacker. Transitioning from being a safety to a full-time linebacker. We've seen multiple guys in this group specifically start out at safeties in high school. Once they get to college, it's like, okay, let's make you a linebacker. TJ Quinn, Jalen Alderman, Ben Perry, multiple players fit that trend for Louisville. And I think that this is going to be something that ultimately you could continue to see for the Cardinals, especially with the versatility at defensive back, as it is being valued in this 4-2-5 base package defense. Do I think Stanquan is going to start game one? Personally, I mentioned the position battles. I think it's going to be TJ Quinn and one of Keith Brown and Jalen Alderman. But it would not surprise me if he did. I think that he is going to play in some capacity. Will it be on special teams? Potentially. Will it be situationally as a third down pass rusher, as a depth substitute? Who knows? But I think he's going to play in some form or fashion week one. That's why for me, the difference between the first and second segment was segment one. We know how much Ashton Gillotte is going to play. We know that he is going to be relied upon to be the guy in the Louisville pass rush. But for Stanquan Clark, it's for different reasons. He's very talented, and he has been ahead of the learning curve, and he has impressed the coaching staff to the point to where, he's going to play. I think we need to keep an eye on Stanquan because I want to see how much of an impact that he can make. I want to see in what ways is he deployed in this defense. Is Mark Hagan and Ron English going to use him as more of a pass rusher? Is he going to drop back into coverage here and there? Is he going to be used strictly as a middle linebacker? That's where things get a little bit interesting, and that's where obviously the coaching staff makes the money to make these decisions. Is I think that they're going to utilize him in a couple of different ways. But I think that that's one thing for me. This is a player that I'm looking forward to seeing because I've heard all of the offseason hype. I've heard from multiple people that have been around the program, that have been at these spring practices, fall camp, that have said that Stanquan Clark has jumped off of the page, so to speak, multiple times, a good amount of times over the past couple of months. And I think that you're starting to see the expectation go from let's be in wait and see, or let's still be in wait and see approach. But now it's like, let's wait and see, but we're going to see him in some capacity. And I'm extremely excited to see how much we are going to see Stanquan. I think he is the guy. He's the freshman on the team that is going to make the most impact, both offensively and defensively. He's going to be a player that, who knows, by the middle of the season, it might be impossible not to start him. Hopefully that is the case. That would be great news for Louisville. But like I said, I think week one, we need to sort of temper those expectations. He could, in all reality, play the majority of the snaps, have a good game, and, we're talking about maybe the next great linebacker for Louisville. Or he could be a guy that plays situationally. We just don't know. And I think that that's what I want to figure out is just how far along does the coaching staff think that Stanquan is, and also as important is who is playing the most in that linebacker position. That's something to focus on Friday evening. So let's keep an eye on Stanquan Clark. But another player that I want to keep an eye out on is Josh Minkins. With the injury to MJ Griffin, there's a lot of responsibility for Minkins even without that injury. And we'll talk about Minkins being due for another breakout season. Before we do that, I want to thank you all again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Just a reminder for content purposes, today is Wednesday. We will have an episode tomorrow morning. I'm going down to Atlanta tomorrow afternoon, so there will not be an episode on Friday. So the episode tomorrow will be predictions, who's going to be the leading stat leaders for Louisville, and final thoughts on the matchup. So we're getting very, very close, and I hope you all are as excited as I am. But to conclude the show, we're discussing the third key defensive player to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in the opening game against Georgia Tech. 7:30 kickoff in the Aflac kickoff game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Friday evening. Josh Minkins last year had a pretty respectable breakout season. He actually tripled his tackles number. He had 55 total tackles compared to 17 in 2021. He recorded his first sack, his first forced fumble, had an interception, and deflected 3 passes, which were the only 3 that he has in his collegiate career. The 6'2" native of Louisville, Kentucky, has been a player that has dealt with injuries throughout his college career. I think that the whole notion now is the best ability is availability. Played 4 games in 2020 as a freshman. You look at the 2021 season, only appeared in 6 contests, including the bowl game. He played better and better as the year went along, but dealt with some injury throughout. And then 2022, he was able to sort of turn in a solid bill of health. I'm not sure that he missed 1 game. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No, he didn't miss 1 game. And that's great to show that he can stay healthy. But he has to show that he can continue to stay healthy. And that's something that I'm very, very interested to see. But even without the injury to MJ Griffin, there was going to be a lot of responsibility at safety for him, losing some players like Kendrick Duncan Jr., even though he didn't necessarily have the greatest 2022 season. Minkins is really going to be relied upon in this defense to be that sort of center fielder for the Cardinals. I look for Minkins to be one of the leaders of this secondary, being the veteran that he is going into his redshirt junior season. Ultimately, I think that this is sort of like for Ashton Gillotte. This is a money season for Josh Minkins. With a solid season, he could be playing himself onto NFL draft radars, has solid size for a safety, being 6'2", and obviously is a very, very good tackler, explosive with solid technique. I would like to see the coverage abilities continue to improve this upcoming season, but there's a lot of responsibility on him anyways. But with the injury to MJ Griffin, things get even more critical for Minkins to have a good year. I think it'll be right away to where we see Minkins being relied upon. Now, I think that Cam Kelly and Devin Neal are going to have solid seasons for Louisville. You could see Marcus Washington from Georgia, the transfer from the Bulldogs program, potentially go at safety to where he played the last season. Who knows? Derek Edwards could slide back there. Multiple cornerbacks also have the skill set to play safety as well. But I think Minkins, with MJ's injury, and MJ was, like I said, MJ was a top 5 player for this team coming into the year. I thought that he was going to be a high NFL draft pick. The transfer from Temple after a very, very good 2022 year. Unfortunately, season-ending knee injury. So the emphasis and responsibility is now even more so on Minkins, to where you're having to rely on him more. Now, granted, Kelly and Neal are also going to be relied upon to fill Griffin's spot. I think that, there's also an injury to D'Angelo Hutchinson. So Minkins is going to have to be extremely reliable in the back half of that Louisville defense. I think he will be, and I think it's going to start game 1. I'm interested to see, how much he's talking out there as a leader in the back half of that defense. I think that he is one of the pivotal parts of this defense, and it's going to be seen right away. I look for him to be involved in the rushing defense, but also in coverage as well for Louisville. So he is a player that I think is due for another breakout season. In conclusion, Ashton Gillotte, it's his time to shine. We should be keeping an eye out on Stanquan Clark, and Josh Minkins is due for another breakout season. One episode to go, and then we are done with episodes for the month of August. Thanks for tuning in this month. Thank you all for tuning into the coverage for Georgia Tech. Hopefully you all have enjoyed the coverage as much as I have enjoyed analyzing the matchup. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. To find the show on all streaming services and platforms, be sure to stay tuned to this graphic.